Hello and welcome to this session of the Islamic History and Thought lecture series organized by the Institute of Ismaili Studies. Our session today opens with a sad note. I would like to take a moment to commemorate His Highness Prince Karim al-Husseini Aga Khan IV, who passed away on the 4th of February. As you know, the Institute of Ismaili Studies was founded by His Highness in 1977 to promote Islamic studies in general and the studies of Ismaili history and heritage in particular. We offer our condolences to the family of His Highness and to Ismaili community worldwide. We hope that today's session is in line with his vision for the IES mission to follow the path of objective, fact-based scholarship and address misconceptions in Islamic studies. So I will start now introducing our speakers. So my name is Orkhan Mir-Kasimov, and I'm Associate Professor at the Institute of Ismaili Studies. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker and discussant, and thank you both for joining us today. Professor Paul Walker is our speaker today. Paul Walker is well known for his many publications on Ismaili and Fatimid topics, among them early philosophical Shiism, the advent of the Fatimids, orations of the Fatimid caliphs, Master of the Age, and most recently, the Fatimids select papers on their governing institutions, social and cultural organization, religious appeal, and rivalries. He is currently Deputy Director for Academic Programs, Center for Middle Eastern Studies, University of Chicago. Dr. Fârès Gillon, our discussant, was actually this series convener until the end of 2022, and is now Maître de Conférence in Islamic Studies and Arabic language at Aix-Marseille University. He obtained his doctorate in Arab and Islamic Studies from the École pratique des hautes études in Paris. His recent publications include the Book of Unveiling, Early Fatimid Ismaili Doctrine in the Kitab al-Kashf, attributed to Ja'far ibn Mansur al-Yaman. His research focuses primarily on Fatimid Ismailism, especially in its relations with its Shia roots and with the parallel tradition of Nusayrism, on which he has published several scholarly articles. He is also interested in the history of ideas in Islam as well as Islamic philosophy. He co-edited with Mathieu Terrier a bilingual anthology of philosophy in Islam, which is forthcoming. So, yeah, I think that's it for the introduction, and I pass the floor to Professor Paul Walker. Please, Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And thanks for the introduction, and my thanks to both Orkhan Mir-Kasimov and Fârès Gillon, two colleagues that I have met in various conferences, and they have heard me speak a little bit about the topic that I'm going to open up today. But what I want to do in the very beginning, and let me put on my own PowerPoint here, because I strongly suspect that most of the audience for today's lecture will find what I have to report on behalf of al-Sijistani completely new. I would like to begin, and I have to confess here that it was completely new to me. And I've been working on Sijistani for almost 60 years. And yet I missed this key material that I'm about to present. Well, so what I have to then explain is that what I'll do is I'll start off with a little apology explanation of what it's like to work on Ismaili texts that were written very, very long time ago, and for which our evidence is a modern manuscript. And it's a question of the manuscripts as well as the text. Following that, I'll go right to the heart of the matter and explain what the title of this thing means: who, when, what of the Qa'im. And finally, at the end, I would like to offer a few comments about what I think is the historical context of this new information. So we start with Sijistani. Over the course of the 10th century, Abu Yaqub al-Sijistani became the leading spokesperson for a very sophisticated kind of Ismaili thought in which you see a heavy dose of Neoplatonism. In so much so that it would be really almost unintelligible without some sort of background in ancient Neoplatonism. In this, he was quite successful. And over the next century, his writings and so on continued to dominate Ismaili discourse that we can follow. Despite the fact that Kirmani, at the beginning of the 11th century, tried to correct what he saw was the defect here and move it away from Neoplatonism in the direction of Aristotle. In the short run, he failed. Sijistani continued to dominate, but later in the Yemen and later Tayyibi Ismaili writing, Kirmani rose to the top and Sijistani declined. However, the scholars in the Tayyibi tradition did preserve Sijistani's writings, and it's thanks to them that we have what we have. Although he is an extremely important author in the Ismaili tradition, we know almost nothing about the man himself. The one fact that is maybe worth mentioning is his nickname, Haishafuj, cottonseed. We don't have any idea why he's called cottonseed, Hambadana in Persian. But two facts. These are his dates. In the year 934, he passed through Baghdad, returning from the pilgrimage. I assume he was an adult at that time and probably active in the Dawah. About 971, he wrote Kitab al-Iftikhar, which we think is probably one of the last works that he authored. So think of this as the meat of his career between these two dates. Of his works, we're lucky to have these 5, which I consider to be major works, and we have recovered them. I say recovered because they've been known to the Tayyibi Ismaili scholars all along because they preserved them. But the general scholarly public did not have access to them, so much so that when I began 50, 60 years ago, they were even difficult to find and to study. But now we have them, and mostly in critical editions, thanks in great part to the work of Ismail Poonawalla, but also Henri Corbin, Herman Landolt, Wilfred Madelung, and I had a little bit to do with some of this as well. And in fact, I've produced at least 3 books on Sijistani. The one on the one side is Cambridge Press, and the other one is actually published by the Institute itself. But what I'm interested in today are the minor works of Sijistani, and we have at least 7 of them. And a current project of mine is to produce good, fairly sound editions of all of them with translations. Although in the case of Tuhfat al-Mustajibin, the gift for the novice, it's been published, the Arabic has been published at least twice, but we don't have a manuscript of it, or at least none that I know of. So that one is really difficult to do. Now, of these others, let me just comment very briefly. For example, the second one, Ta'lif al-Arwah. We have a manuscript. What the manuscript simply says is Abu Yaqub was asked about this subject, and here is what he said. Doesn't say Sijistani, it just says Abu Yaqub. The tradition thought that must be a Sijistani. My own feeling is it's not by Sijistani, but I have not found where else it might have been. Two of them, Mawazin ad-Din and Khaza'in ad-Dillah, both mentioned as the Imam of the time, al-Hakim. That would have to make them authored after 996. I think that's way too late. I doubt if Sijistani lived that long. What they are summaries of his teaching by anonymous author, but dedicated to al-Hakim. Okay, now my focus is going to be on Sullam and al-Najat, but I also want to mention that recently, or the publication is recent, but some time ago, our colleague Bustan Herji did a doctoral dissertation at McGill on that one, the final item, the treatise. And she produced a critical edition of the Arabic and a translation of that one. But I'm moving on and focusing particularly on Sullam and al-Najat, which was the subject of a fine scholarly dissertation produced in 1983 at Harvard by our old friend and colleague, Mohamed Alibhai. I want to show this as a page from his dissertation. And you can see that he did all the apparatus for a scholarly edition with variations and whatnot. He had two manuscripts that he could consult. I have a little complaint about it being slightly difficult to read, but it's invaluable. When I learned from him that he had no intention of going back to it and publishing it, I took up the text itself and began by transcribing his edition and then working from manuscripts. So he had two manuscripts at his disposal, that one, and this one from the Faizi collection, which in fact I had secured a copy of very, very long time and studied it. And I studied it, but missed what I'm about to report. So I apologize for some of that. The Institute also has another manuscript. This one it looks difficult to read, but in fact, it works very well. The nice thing about this is it's 19th century, 1859, whereas the other two manuscripts are 20th century. So this gives us a little bit of a way to look back at the tradition of this particular text. And also, if you notice in the margin there, the copyist has copied his or her own version, but then read it against another manuscript and put the variations in the margin, marked with a kha from Nusra. So in fact, that's almost the evidence of yet another manuscript. So we have maybe 4 manuscripts for this particular text. Now, what's happened in this work, let me stop and say that Sijistani's aim with this work is to explain to Muslims what is proper belief in the 7 categories that of belief that is incumbent on a true Muslim believer. So believe in God, in his angels, his books, his messengers, the last day, the resurrection, and paradise and the fire. What Sijistani or what we have in these manuscripts, however, runs apparently soundly through the first 6 and has no evidence of the the section that should have been there on Paradise in the Fire. Instead, at the end of the sixth one, there is a gap, and the copyist says, there's a gap here, and here is what I found afterward. But what's afterward is all about ritual purity. It does not belong in this text. Then after that section, we have a fuss inserted of about 1 page, and I don't know where that came from. It's completely different subject. And then finally, after that, we have another one where it says chapter from the Kitab al-Rushd wal-Hadaya by Mansur al-Yaman. Very interesting. Okay. A very long time ago, in 1948, an Egyptian scholar, Mohamed Kamal Hussein, published the Arabic text of that section, and Ivanov translated it and published that. Neither one of them paid any attention or little or no attention to the real text of the Sullam and al-Najat. I do not know why, but they didn't notice. So I may be forgiven for not having noticed before either. Okay, let's turn now to the text itself. What we're after is his discussion of the Qa'im, which he takes up in the chapter on the messengers. He begins it by saying it is incumbent on the true believer in the messengers to recognize where they are in time. There is historical time, past, present, and the future. He says that many religions make the mistake of assuming that their time is, and the time of their prophet is the end of the prophets, without realizing, and if they had known about the flow of time, they would realize there had to be another one. And so there would be one to come later. The other way to look at time is a hierarchy. So time is divided hierarchically. So you have hour, day, week, month, year, generation, and then the epic of a prophet, and then so on. So you see there's a hierarchy. We're moving up. Religious authority also follows that same hierarchy. So you have a master of the hour and master of the so on, so and so. And what in the end is to notice is summarized here by this is a diagram that I'm came upon. So the dower, that's the epic of the great prophets. So Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad were each a Lord Master of that epic. The Qa'im is superior to all of them, above in this way, because he is the Lord Master of the Kawr, which consists of a number of dowers. So you can see that the Qa'im is above. They are beholden to him. He is superior to them. If that sinks in, then you can begin to understand. The Qa'im, however, is not the seventh. In a sense, he is the seventh, but he's not one more of the law-giving prophets. He is above them. His role is to reveal the truth of all that they have brought. So they brought laws, at least 5 of them, and they brought a scripture, a revelation. He and he alone can understand all the ambiguity that is built into all of those laws and the scriptures. They are full of allusions, of metaphors, of mutashabbahat, ambiguity, ambiguous verses. He knows what they really mean. Okay, so you can see it's vitally important at this point to know who the Qa'im was. And I want to make some qualifications here. Was clearly is in the past. and I will continue to put it that way. One might argue as to whether the Qa'im is still functioning, but this is an event that took place in the past. Also, I find no English term that actually translates what he means by Qa'im. So it's better, I think, to keep the Arabic term. It will avoid false ambiguity or false references and notions. But critical, who was the Qa'im? And the answer is al-Mubarak. Al-Mubarak. If you're not familiar with that term, and realize that that is Ismail, the son of Ja'far as-Sadiq. Ismail, not Mohammed bin Ismail, Ismail. If you are vague about this, I suggest you do exactly what I did and go to Farhad Daftari's masterful The Ismailis, look in the index for al-Mubarak and al-Mubarakiyya. And you'll realize that this is correct. Sijistani says the Qa'im was Ismail. To make it even clearer, he says al-Mubarak was the 6th Imam of the era of Muhammad. For the Ismailis of that time, Ali ibn Abi Talib was not an Imam. He was the Asas. So the first Imam for them is Hassan, then Hussein, then Ali, then Muhammad, then Ja'far, and then Ismail. So he became the Qa'im, and again, we need to speculate about when, but I will remind you at this point that Ja'far as-Sadiq died in 765. I think, given other hints in the text, that that's about when we're talking, that Ismail became the Qa'im about then. However, when he did, his following was extremely little. His agents, the lieutenants, the Lawahik, were not spread throughout the Islamic Empire. He was threatened from all angles. He had lots of adversaries. He was in such dire situation that he and his son were forced to go into an occultation, a ghaiba. That's what Sijistani says. Thereby instituting what is called an interregnum, but the Arabic is al-Fatra, the Fatra. The Fatra is a period when the supreme religious authority is not available, because in this case, he's gone into occultation and is not in direct contact with his followers. So this is a crisis that is set in motion at this point. The Qa'im is in ghaiba. The enemies are everywhere. And at that point, the leading family in the Islamic realm decides to take over. Think the Abbasids. What Sijistani says is, having recently overcome and gotten rid of the Umayyads, they then decide that they will take over. And among other things, they will use the Alid family and take its status and put it to their own benefit. And one of the things he accuses them of is trying to steal or usurp the imamate. Now, part of the process that takes place in this delicate time is that they promote philosophy as the answer and rational inquiry, aqliyat. Sijistani thinks that's terrible because they're doing it in order to not use the proper authorities, the ones that God ordained that should lead the community. They also, as he puts it, plunge into the ocean of kalam, theology. Well, Sijistani is not against kalam, but it's not properly guided. It has no authority. It's false. But one of the worst things is they create this sect called the Imamiyya. And they try to use that in order to suppress the true people that God has chosen to lead the community. So this is a crisis. And what he says is this is a period of the 4 caliphs or khulafa of the Qa'im. So if we think that out, you can see where we are. The key is that God, that the true believers, the true disciples of the Qa'im are beseeching God for help to restore the right religion. Slowly but truly and progressively, they gain more authority, more power. The lieutenants of the Qa'im are spread finally in all the provinces of the Islamic Empire. And finally, the 4th of these khulafa, the 4th deputy, is finally powerful enough to actually conquer and begin to conquer cities. Al-Mahdi, obviously. So finally, there's a triumph. The detractors, the adversaries, are caught in their attempt to steal the imamate, and the shame of theft accrues to them, and they are eventually thrown out of court, so to speak. Okay, that's where al-Sijistani comes down. If you follow it carefully, you understand that the Imam Caliph is the ultimate representative of the Qa'im in the world. And the agency comes from the Qa'im. There's no mention of a return. It's that the Qa'im is there. His inspiration flows through the Imam Caliph. And the Imam Caliph is the person who can supply the truth and the wisdom that's embedded in the law and previous scriptures. There's no cancellation of any previous scripture. It's all valid. It's now, everything now comes down to the Imam Caliph. Well, that's the end of what Sijistani says. He does not specify any return. If you noticed carefully, the Qa'im went into Ghaiba with his son. That's the only thing that to mention the son. The son would have been Mohammed bin Ismail. He has no role. He's gone into Ghaiba with his father. Okay. What I think we are seeing is that Sijistani is saying that the doctrine, which was fairly widely spread among Ismaili peoples, movements, that the 7th Imam of the era of Muhammad was the Qa'im and was in Ghaiba, might return. And when he does, or maybe he already has appeared, and he then will cancel the laws of the previous, including the law of Muhammad. We know that the Qarmatians had some form of this idea. They expected, they either argued that Muhammad bin Ismail had come and the law of Islam was null and void, or that would happen and we would have the Qa'im appear. That caused a certain amount of problem for the caliphate, because that was not the doctrine that would have held up in the situation that al-Mahdi found in North Africa, for example. He took the title al-Mahdi, indicating he was the rightly guided guide. His son was al-Qa'im, actually the same term. the idea is that the Imam Caliph is a rank that will continue into the future, and maybe there is no such thing as this appearance of the Qa'im, a return of the Qa'im, that everything depends on the current Imam Caliph. Notice that Mohammed bin Ismail in Sijistani's version kind of fades from the picture. He's not there. He's mentioned, I mean, as the son of the Qa'im, but he doesn't have a role. My feeling is that what's happened is that Sijistani or someone above him has as their goal getting rid of that older, troublesome notion that maybe Qa'im will cancel the law of Muhammad. In Sijistani's version, he certainly does not. He can explain it, but it's still in effect. So Muslims still will follow the law of Muhammad and the scripture of the Quran. What is different is that they do not necessarily understand it properly. And for that, they will have to go to the agent of the Qa'im, who is the only person who has access to that. It's not done in a public way, but it's done in private through the daʿwah. Now, that's what I have to report. And at the end here, I'm really tempted to wonder if it's possible, and remember the dates of Sijistani, that we believe probably his career sort of came to an end in 971 or thereabouts. Al-Mu'izz died in 975. They overlap. I'm tempted to wonder if this is not something promoted by the Caliph al-Mu'izz. One final note. Also clear, more or less, from the text that I'm talking about. The last day is not the end of time. It's simply the last day of several days. It has no force. The resurrection does not apply to the body. It is only the soul and the mind. Sijistani is quite clear about that. And then the question of paradise and the fire, the reward is knowledge. Punishment is ignorance. The reward is the knowledge that you gain from the Imam.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you. That's indeed a somewhat new idea of the Qa'im. Can I start maybe with some question just to clarify a few points I might not have understood correctly? If Qa'im was Ismail ibn Ja'far as-Sadiq, and he already came, doesn't that mean that actually the era of the Qiyamah already started then at that point? And also, so this is one thing. And the second thing is that if the role of Qa'im is just to provide the correct interpretation of Quran and Islamic law, how is he different then from the Imam, from the just historical Imam?
Okay, the first question is, you're assuming that the Qiyamah is an event. What he's showing is, if you go back to my pyramid, what he's showing is the Qa'im is above. So he rises above and over, and then the interpretation of what's in scripture or what's in the law is known to him. But it was put there by God himself, that the ambiguity, And it's vital that you understand. And your second question is, what's the difference between that and the imam? Well, in fact, nothing, because that's what I think is going on here. The Qa'im exists, and his representative is the imam. So the imam can do what the Qa'im inspired him to do.
So the line of the imams continues in the presence of Qa'im, in a sense, then.
Yeah, well, that's what I know. I mean, Sijistani doesn't indicate in the presence of, but with the inspiration of.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I pass the floor to Dr. Gillon now, please. Fârès,
thank you very much,
yes.
Orkhan. Thank you very much for your kind invitation, and thanks to Paul for this very thought-provoking presentation. I think it's very interesting, and it raises almost as much questions as it solves. I have a lot of questions. I will just try to gather my thoughts in a couple of questions. So the first comment I have is that what strikes me when I listen to you is actually how this doctrine is compatible with what I've studied from the Fatimid doctrine in the works of Ja'far ibn Mansur al-Yaman, and particularly in his Kitab al-Rida fil Batin, where, so he doesn't use the term Qa'im, he prefers the term Mahdi there, but the role attributed to the Qa'im is very similar to this, this role of oversight. Like the Qa'im is not just an event in the future, is not someone who is coming in the future. He's, well, he is actually, but more importantly, he is represented by a present living imam in both his functions, namely the exoteric and esoteric ones. So I guess my first question would be, how would you understand this, proximity of the ideas, when at the same time we also have some discrepancies? So, for instance, the role attributed to Ismail and the fact that Mohamed ibn Ismail is not is out of the picture.
Not entirely out of the picture, but
yes, well, he doesn't have an important role, and he's not identified with the Qa'im.
He's been demoted.
Yes. So also this, how do you connect this? I mean, what conclusions can you take from this findings? When comparing it to what Madlung was saying in his famous article on the imamate in the early Ismaili doctrine. So in this article, he does mention, he studies in particular the famous Risala al-Mudhiba, which is attributed to al-Qadi al-Nu'man, and which displays a similar doctrine. So it may differ in detail, but the same idea is here. The imams are representatives or deputies of the Qa'im. So what should we make of this?
Well, it's been a long time since I looked at the Mudhiba, but I remember it as being very strange, but I don't remember the details.
Okay, and I had a question about the general, since you're an expert in al-Sijistani's thought. I mean, how consistent is the Sullam al-najat with al-Sijistani's other works?
Well, the key part here about the Qa'im I've never seen before.
But does it contradict what he says elsewhere?
He doesn't. Sijistani does not have much to say about the imamate. He's more interested in the prophet, Nubuwah. So I've always wondered exactly what his position was vis-a-vis the imamate. And there are some places for example, in his Ithbat an-Nubuwat, we don't have the final two chapters. They've been lost, but somebody has collected a few bits and pieces and stuck them in there. And I'm not sure they're authentic. So I would worry about using any, but people have used them as if they are authentic Sijistani. I'm not sure that's an answer to your question, but.
Well, I mean, it's yeah. I mean, there are matters, several matters of consistency. The consistency of Sijistani with himself, and consistency of Sijistani with the Fatimid doctrine and the Fatimid doctrine of the Qa'im, and yes, that raises the general question of al-Sijistani's relationship with the Fatimids. I mean, how. Because on the one hand, it seems that this is very close to what we can find in some early Fatimid works, and also this idea that the Qa'im is not well, the eschatological role of the Qa'im is toned down in favor of the presence of the Imam. So
yeah.
But on the other hand, there are also some important differences, for instance, with again the role of Ismail, and also you mentioned the possible connection to al-Mu'izz, saying that that al-Sijistani's career and al-Mu'izz's reign overlapped, but al-Mu'izz is also the one who reinstated Muhammad ibn Ismail in his genealogy. So. And the importance.
Well.
Yeah, okay. And just to finish on the importance attributed to Ismail seems more in line with what we have in Ubaydullah al-Mahdi's letter to the Yemenis, where he emphasizes he doesn't claim ancestry, Ismail's ancestry, but rather Abdullah al-Afdah.
It seemed in the Sullam al-Najat, it seems it's a little bit tricky, but it seems that Sijistani is saying that in fact these the four deputies, the Khulafa, are in fact descendants of Ismail, but it's not totally clear. In any case, we do know that Sijistani career went on for a long time, and there are other treatises, and that there may have been changes. I think this is a late development for him, but it is authentic. It is him, because he does say early in the beginning on this particular topic what I have already said in my book al-Maqarid is sufficient. We don't need to do it again. So he recognized it, but that also means that al-Maqalid was much earlier and the Sullam al-Najat is later.
So, yeah.
I can add, that Sijistani was accused of believing in metempsychosis at one point. And Nasr Khosrow says that the higher authority corrected him and he changed his view. What higher authority could there be other than al-Mu'izz? So it hints at there being a connection between the two. Yes,
but what is the nature of this?
Right.
Of this connection. I mean, yeah. I of course you may not have a definitive answer right now, but I mean, this is a very difficult matter. This relationship of al-Sijistanis to the Fatimids. So I mean, it's generally admitted that he acknowledged their authority.
Well, he said the fourth of them was the first to conquer cities. So he recognized the Fatimids.
And I had a question. I mean, this description of the Qa'im, which is sort of a de-eschatolization of the Qa'im, brings us to a more spiritual or maybe political understanding of the Qa'im. So you said the Qa'im is not the seventh, but he's above all the prophets. Can we understand that al-Sijistani is trying to tone down the messianic expectations and the political unrest that
That's
it
entails? That's exactly what I think is going on here.
So yeah, so then he's completely in line with Fatimid approach.
Eventually, yes. I think that's why I suggested that maybe Al-Mu'izz was the person who suggested to Sijistani that he perform this task in this manner. But there's so many questions that we can answer because we just have this text and we're you want to know more, but he doesn't give us any more.
So building on this connection that you're mentioning between Sijistani and al-Mu'izz, can we conclude from this that the introduction of Neoplatonism in the Fatimid thought was a consequence of this rapprochement between Sijistani and al-Mu'izz?
Well, isn't that Madelung's theory that the major figures did not accept the Neoplatonism until al-Mu'izz, and al-Mu'izz then accepted it as being a valid interpretation?
Because there's another approach to this, which is that the Fatimids were in fact trying to build a rival system to reply to the Eastern daʿis. So what?
Well, who was?
Well, I mean, I think that David Hollenberg in his book hints at this idea that some doctrines that are developed in Ja'far ibn Mansur al-Yaman's works, in the Sara'il al-Nutaqa in particular, that they are more of an answer to the Eastern daʿis rather than an endorsement.
Well, I would have to go back and look at that.
Well, thank you very much. In any case, I think we can.
Thank you for your reactions.
No,
At least now I have some reactions.
I look forward to read your book when it's out.
Well, at least when we get this particular text fully translated and properly edited, at least as far as I can go with it. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we're coming now to the end of our time today. So I want to thank Paul. Many thanks for this stimulating lecture. And thanks to both of you for joining us today. And also thank you to everyone in our audience who joined us for this lecture. And also many thanks to everyone who supported this lecture behind the scenes. In particular thanks to Notion Premji, our events manager, and to our Department of Communications and Development, and to our events team. Thank you very much again. And I hope to see you all in the next lectures of the series.
And thanks to you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.